Hello and welcome to my latest video. So this time we're going to take in our next look through the vintage Star Trek the Original Series pocketbook novelizations. Now we'll start with Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, go all the way through up to Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. It's a nice little block there. And it includes the controversial Star Trek Killing Time, which was the book that was, well, so controversial in its day that it actually got withdrawn, and consequently first printings are quite scarce. So we've got all of that to look at in today's video. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay, so we start off with the novelization of the Star Trek 3 movie, The Search for Spock. And this was written again by Vonda N. McIntyre and based on the screenplay by Harve Bennett. And Vonda McIntyre had, of course, written The Wrath of Khan movie adaptation about 2.5 years before that. And this one is still part of the main series. You see Star Trek 17 on the spine there, and 17 in the top right corner. And this was the first one to sort of launch the non-timescape. So all the Star Trek books now are just sort of classed as, well, you see it up there, science fiction. And they're just published under the regular pocket science fiction banner, imprint. So yeah, all signs of timescape have now gone. So it's a pretty standard novelization, to be honest, and there's very little extra added beyond what we saw on the screen. It's funny, I do vaguely remember reading this one before I actually got to see the film in the cinema. There's a couple of movies like that, particularly I remember Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, both had the novelizations out before in the shops before the movies had been released, at least released in the UK, where we used to get the movies 6 to 9 months after America. Really, really great cover by Boris Vallejo. He's not credited, you can't see his familiar Boris signature, but in fact, I believe almost every single cover that we're going to see today, bar maybe one or two, were done by Boris, and he certainly must have been on some retainer with the Star Trek books. So there we are, and of course this was the last movie adaptation to be released with a number, because after that they were released sort of as standalone novels and not part of the main sort of Star Trek line. Next one we got is, well, it's a bit of a bona fide Star Trek classic, isn't it? It's My Enemy, My Ally by Diane Duane. Now, I've got a couple of copies of this and I'll explain why, but the first edition I actually got recently, and it was sent over by my friend Chris in the States, and he also pointed out on the last video that you can tell the first editions because they've got the sort of the gold lettering. My later reprint here, this is the second printing, has got like a matte finish, whereas this one's got the sort of slightly raised gold lettering, and that's the way you can tell these Star Trek books are in the first edition. Now, this one by Diane Duane was in actual fact the first part of what would become a sequence of 5 books. It was followed by The Romulan Way, Sword Hunt, Honor Blade, and The Empty Chair. Now, it's got an excellent premise, which sees a Romulan commander learn of a plot that uses Vulcans for genetic experiments. Having met Kirk before, the Romulan Al seeks out assistance from Captain Kirk. Duane says she first got the idea of exploring the relationship between the Vulcans and the Romulans whilst watching the episode The Enterprise Incident. The main Romulan, being female, was a result of her wanting Kirk to finally come up against a strong woman. So let's have a little read of the back here. So, my enemy, my ally. Altut Raliu, if that's how you pronounce it, is a noble and dangerous Romulan commander. But when the Romulans kidnap Vulcans to genetically harness their mind power, El decides on treason. Captain Kirk, her old enemy, joins her in a secret pact to destroy the research laboratory and free the captive Vulcans. When the Romulans discover their plan, the neutral zone seethes with schemes and counter-schemes, sabotage and war. Wow. There you go. So this is an absolute bona fide Star Trek classic, which if you've never read it, you'll want to put this one at the top of your to-be-read pile, that's for sure. Now, as I said, I've got 2 copies of this one, and the first edition has got that slightly raised gold lettering on the front there. July 84. Then this sort of second printing I picked up in a job lot because I've been really struggling to find the first of that, perhaps for about a year. And this one was like another one of my earlier ones. It had been signed by Diane Duane down the bottom there of the title page, which is really nice. But as I said, this is just the second printing, denoting by the number 2 there. And that's the lowest number, generally shows you what printing the book actually is. Very, very nice jacket on that one. And Boris does actually get, you can actually see his signature there. Yeah, great stuff. So that's My Enemy, My Ally. And that was book number 18 in the series. Book 19 then is The Tears of the Singers by Melinda Snodgrass. And Melinda Snodgrass became an instant fan of Star Trek after seeing the episode The Man Trap. She decided on a career as a writer, and through her agent was able to submit a successful outline for a story to Timescape editor David Hartwell. Snodgrass had analysed all the previous Star Trek episodes and decided to try writing an episode in line with sort of the Trouble with Tribbles, sort of City on the Edge of Forever, the less sort of serious side of Star Trek. And the result was The Tears of the Singers. So it's an Uhura heavy story, but this is because she felt, well, quite rightly, that the character had been underused on the original show, and there's certainly a lot to be said for that. So let's have a look at the blurb on the back. So it says, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise joined the Klingons to avert disaster in the Tai-Geti 5 system, where a time-space warp has swallowed a spaceship without a trace. Spock suspects a link between the anomaly and the inhabitants of Tai-Geta, semi-aquatic creatures killed for the jewel-like tears secreted at the moment of death. But a mutinous Klingon officer threatens the vital mission as a desperate Kirk and Spock race to save the Tai-Getians, the Federation, and the entire universe. Well, certainly not your average Star Trek novel, but it was fun to see Uhura take a central role in the story. Not really my cup of tea, but still an interesting entry in this series. Snodgrass recalled that David Hartwell gave her one valuable piece of advice. Use this Trek book as a launch pad for your writing career, but never write another one. Which was what she actually did, and she never did write another Star Trek book ever again. She did, however, become a member of the writing staff on the Next Generation's second season, and did actually write the TV episode, The Measure of a Man. That was that great one with Data, like the courtroom setting one with Data in. And once again, a really, really nice Boris cover with sort of Spock in the background there, sort of looking on. Yeah, good stuff. So this is The Vulcan Academy Murders by Jean Laurie, and it's book number 20 in the series. So Jean Laurie first discovered Star Trek by seeing it featured in the 1966 fall preview issue of TV Guide. And she made a point of watching the first episode and was completely hooked. You could only get a Star Trek book accepted if you had a previous writing credits, and by the time this was published, Laurie had a couple of novels to her name, so when she submitted The Vulcan Academy Murders, it was accepted. This book also spawned a direct sequel, The Idic Epidemic. So let's read the back then. So The Vulcan Academy Murders. Kirk and McCoy accompany Spock to the Vulcan Academy Hospital, seeking experimental treatment for a badly wounded Enterprise crew member. Spock's mother is also a patient in the hospital, and Kirk soon becomes involved in the complex drama of Spock's family. Suddenly, patients are dying, and Kirk suspects the unthinkable, murder on Vulcan. But can he convince the Vulcans that something as illogical as murder is possible? Until the killer is caught, everyone is in danger. Yeah, so it's a bit of a weird one. This is almost like a cross between a Hercule Poirot and an episode of Columbo. With Kirk being sort of the detective trying to figure out who is behind the murders. But I remember this being excellent, and yeah, I'm sure it was one of the ones I read very early on, and probably as an American import, because the books hadn't started to be printed by Titan in the UK over here at this point, so it would have been on an import copy. So next we got 21, which is Uhura's Song, written by Janet Kagan. Once again, another great jacket here. So Janet Kagan says she was conned into writing a Trek book by the editor David Hartwell. He had seen and read her manuscript for her science fiction novel Hellspark. Hartwell suggested that she write a Trek novel first, which she proceeded to do. Although not a massive fan, she immersed herself in the show and started to draft out a story. She asked her friends what they would like to see happen with the classic crew members, something that they hadn't seen on the TV show. Once again, Uhura seemed to be the character that was most underused, and Kagan had seen Nichols on a NASA promotional film and she was impressed, so she was open to having her story revolve around that character. So let's have a little look on the back here. So it says, years ago, Lieutenant Uhura befriended a diplomat from Iliu, the land of graceful, cat-like beings. The two women exchanged forbidden songs and promised never to reveal their secret. Now the Enterprise is orbiting Iliu in a desperate race to save the inhabitants before a deadly plague destroys them. Uhura's secret songs may hold the key to a cure, but the clues are veiled in layers of mystery. The plague is killing humans, threatening other planets, and Kirk must crack the code before the Enterprise succumbs. Quite a long one, this one as well. Look at this, it's just a shade under 380 pages, so certainly one of the longer books. And, I vaguely remember this might have been released as a standalone giant book in the UK, as I recall. So the book took a while to get into print, as around this time, David Hartwell had actually left Simon & Schuster and moved on to Tor. So the new editor, Mimi Panish, appears to have taken over the reins. Although Kagan had several outlines for a sequel, none ever made it into print, and she passed away herself in 2008. And once again, a really, really great Boris cover there. So yeah, it's interesting. So by this point, or around this point, the series editor David Hartwell, who basically launched the range for Pocket, had obviously been tempted over to Tor Books, and this editor Mimi Panish had taken over. But I don't think she was there very long. I mean, potentially just a few months before the next editor came in, and there was certainly a sort of period of turmoil, it seems, behind the scenes at Pocket around this sort of time. Now, book 22 then is this one, which is Shadow Lord by Lawrence Yep. Now, Lawrence Yep said he wanted to examine in a bit more depth Mr. Sulu, who was an Asian American descent, and Mr. Spock being half human, half Vulcan. So in this story, he pairs them together with Prince Vikram, with the action taking place predominantly on the planet. He cites his favourite film as The Seven Samurai, and there are many similarities with that film and feudal Japan. Now, he remembers having to be very careful in expanding Sulu's history and not stepping beyond what was already in place for the character. So let's have a little read of the back here. So Angira is a primitive, violent planet, and young Prince Vikram returns from Earth filled with new ideas. When Sulu and Spock accompany Vikram home, they walk into a bloodbath. Reactionary forces, afraid of any modernization, have seized Vikram's rightful throne. Suddenly, the men from the Enterprise are on an underground journey with a prince who is coming of age. The future of Angira is at stake, and each man's survival depends on his skill and daring with a sword. And we do see a little bit of sword play in this one, and it's something we had seen, of course, in the series with Mr. Sulu. So certainly not bad, this one, and I have always enjoyed sort of stories where Sulu is sort of brought to the forefront. Yep himself is Asian American, and like George Takei, it's so easy to see where the inspiration came from. This is really, really good, this one, and once again, a fantastic Boris cover there, really quite detailed. certainly a very angry Mr. Spock there, and you see it in a bit more close up. They do take the best sort of element of the cover and reuse it at this time on the Trek books, and you sort of see that with Mr. Spock there. Okay, book 23 by Barbara Hambly is Ismael, the name of the main protagonist in Moby Dick, of course, a famous opening line, "Call me Ismael." A bit of a tatty copy, this one. One actually that needs to be upgraded because it's a big cover crease and a spine crease as well. And Barbara Hambly was a fan of Star Trek right from the start. She'd started writing fan fiction at the age of 15 while season 1 was still airing. Ismael had been written years before publication and went through many sets of hands before finally seeing print. She expressed surprise that it ever did see the final publication. Maybe with Trek being so hot at this time, all original fiction was sort of in demand. So let's read the back here. So it says, "The Enterprise is on a peaceful mission at Starbase 12 when a bizarre cosmic phenomenon causes a Klingon ship to suddenly vanish, with Spock aboard for the ride. Spock's last message from the Klingon ship is cryptic and frightening. The Klingons are travelling into the past, searching for the one man who holds a vital key to the future. If they can kill that man, the course of history will be changed and the Federation will be destroyed." So great fun, this one. Yet another time travel story, but I do love those anyway. Hambly went on to write another couple of Star Trek novels, Ghost Walker and Crossroad, which of course we'll cover in future videos. And once again, you can guess the sort of cover artist. It's Boris, and I can't help but think that looks like someone looking over the sort of the casino poker table there. It looks a bit like Majel Barrett. But that was book number 23. Okay, so book 24 is Killing Time by Della Van Heijs. Now, this is probably the most controversial of all Star Trek novels, and it's also amongst the most expensive in a first edition, on the collector's market at least. It's not actually the most valuable Star Trek book. That honour falls to the Deep Space Nine novel, A Stitch in Time by Andrew Robinson, and I'm very much looking forward to getting round to those in due course. The story involves an alternate timeline where Captain Spock is actually in command of a starship which is patrolling the Romulan neutral zone. Ensign James Kirk is having a nightmare about a different ship, one where he is in command and Spock is by his side. This mixed up reality is the result of a Romulan time travel experiment designed to stop the Federation from being formed. So yet again, two stories on the trot, being time travel related. So let's read the back. So it says, "Second History, a Romulan time tampering project that has transported the Enterprise and the galaxy into an alternate dimension of reality. Now, Kirk is an embittered young ensign and Spock is a besieged starship commander. Lured into a Romulan trap, Captain Spock and Ensign Kirk must free themselves from both their captors and their own altered selves before the galaxy hurtles towards total destruction." That sounds brilliant. I do love these sort of what-if alternate timeline stories. So, as I said, this is a bit controversial. So the story goes that Gene Roddenberry received a letter from a female fan stating that the novel suggested a homoerotic relationship between Kirk and Spock. Now, the original version does indeed contain what is known as slash fiction, something that's been around in Trek fandom for years. Basically, members of the same sex, usually males, having relationships on board starships. Roddenberry was not best pleased and ordered pocketbooks to get it off the shelves. Now, the book's original print run was 250,000 copies, and of these, at least 150,000 were already in stores or had been sold. A recall was immediately started by pocketbooks, but once the news leaked to fans, virtually all copies were snapped up as future collector's items. The book was, of course, revised, with as many as 50 changes before it got to its second printing. Roddenberry's assistant, Richard Arnold, was now installed to give final approval to the finished scripts before they went to press. Now, it would seem, piecing together various sources around the internet, that due to there being a change of editors at Pocket around this time, the manuscript that had been with Pocket for a few years already just didn't get the scrutiny it might usually have. There was a revised edition ready, but an earlier draft seems to have been sent to the printers rather than the corrected version. Now, Della Van Hise herself passed away in March 2021. Although a prolific author of fan fiction and slash fiction, Killing Time was her one and only official Star Trek novel. Now, I do have a couple of copies of this one. It's a USA first edition, which is this one here with the gold raised logo. And I've got the Canadian first edition, which is the one I've had for many years. And that's got the little Canadian maple leaf in the bottom left corner there. I've been through them. They've got the same page count, and they do appear to be both the version with the slightly controversial lines. But, you know, it's not out and out sex, but it's just suggestions, and it's very, very tame. And I don't know if it was published today, if it would even raise an eyebrow. But back then, in 1985, it was a very much different time, and perhaps the publishers didn't want to take the risk, and they certainly didn't want to annoy Roddenberry. So the revised edition came out. But there we are. That's the story behind it. I don't think it's that controversial, and the story is absolutely cracking. So just pick it up and read it. I don't think you absolutely need to have that first printing, because the revised edition, there's very little taken out. There really isn't. So I wouldn't worry too much. But that's the story of Killing Time. Book 25 then is Dwellers in the Crucible, and this one's by Margaret Wander Bonanno. Now, Margaret Wander Bonanno was quite a prolific Star Trek author, with in total 7 books to her name. Now, she wrote quite a bit of science fiction and fantasy anyway, and she also ghost wrote some novels and even a biography. She did co-author a book with Nichelle Nichols in 1996 called Saturn's Child. Now, this one has an interesting premise, as it examines the relationship between Kirk and Spock from a female point of view. So let's have a look at the back. It says, "Warranters of peace, the Federation's daring experiment to prevent war amongst its members. Each warranter, man or woman, is hostage for the government of the native world and is instantly killed if that world breaks the peace. Now, Romulans have kidnapped 6 warranters to foment political chaos and then civil war within the Federation. Captain Kirk must send Sulu to infiltrate Romulan territory, find the hostages and bring them back alive before the Federation self-destructs." Now, I read this one recently, and it is really well written, and it doesn't feel like it was knocked together in a few weeks like some of those early Star Trek novels. It feels really well crafted over like a much longer period of time. The dialogue is sharp, and the story moves along at a good pace. Certainly a great novel, but not one that would perhaps, transfer very well to a TV episode. Bonanno herself sadly passed away in April of this year, 2021. And once again, the cover is by Boris. So that was book 25. So book 26 is Pawns and Symbols, and that's by Majlis Larsen. Now, very little seems to be known about Majlis Larsen. This appears to be her only ever published work. Maybe it was an attempt by her to become an established author, who knows, but looking online, it just yielded next to nothing about her. Let's have a look at the back anyway. So, threatened by a deadly famine, the Klingon Empire is on the verge of igniting a mad interplanetary war of conquest. When an earthquake destroys a remote Federation research station, Jean Skersny, agricultural scientist, succumbs to amnesia. Stranded on enemy borders, she is imprisoned by Kang, the evil commander of a Klingon battleship. Now, Kirk must play a dangerous game of mind strategy to prevent a savage attack on the Federation. Now, Larsen was obviously a fan of the original show, and it's heavily influenced by the original TV episode, The Trouble with Tribbles. So we do get appearances and mentions of Space Station K7, the Klingon commander Kang, as first seen in Day of the Dove, and even Quanto Triticale Yes, the wheat. Pretty good fun, this one, and it was a blast looking for the previous classic Star Trek references throughout. Again, a really, really superb Boris Falagio jacket with a very serious looking Kirk there. Brilliant. I wonder why. I wonder why she just never went on and did any more writing. It doesn't appear as if she wrote anything else at all, even non-Star Trek stuff. Number 27 then, and the last one we're going to have a look at today is Mind Shadow by J.M. Dillard. Now, J.M. Dillard, the name, is actually a pseudonym for the author Jeanine Kalgoridis. Now, Jean became a Star Trek fan during the show's original run, and she recalls seeing the episode Bread and Circuses in a rerun of Amok Time and being completely hooked. Now, she'd read The Entropy Effect by Vonda McIntyre and decided to have a go herself. It was 13 months before she heard back from Pocket Books saying that they'd like to buy the novel, and this was the first of her at least 16 novels spread over various Star Trek series, so a highly prolific Star Trek author, but this was her very first one. Let's have a little look on the back here. So it says, the tranquil planet of Aritina has suddenly come under attack by a vicious and unknown enemy. The Enterprise rallies to the scene, only to plunge into a deadly nightmare. Spock is found mysteriously injured, his mental powers crippled and weak, and Kirk uncovers an evil Romulan plot with a cunning double agent in the middle. As Spock begins to regain his memory, Kirk strives to expose the agent, but only Spock's knowledge can stop the Romulans from controlling the universe. So this was a great Spock-centric story. Jeannie admits to being a huge Spock fan right from the start. A really enjoyable story, and I'm pleased to see there was lots more coming up by this author. So although I've read this one, there are quite a few more to come. And the final cover, of course, by Boris Cernit. He's actually got the signature there. So there we go. I think that will do for today's video. Next time we'll continue going through these early Pocket Books, and we'll go past the Star Trek 4 adaptation and see the first couple of giant novels. So I do hope you've enjoyed looking through those books today. If you have, do please give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing if you've not already for regular Star Trek book videos, and I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Live long and prosper.